Volume 3 Chapter 32. With Shiltir gone, and after Zariasu and Crush Lulu spoke, it was Kyuku, clad in his white bone armor, who addressed the masses. His words were slow as ever, as if he had to wade through thick mud to find the wherewithal to speak. Kill. Frogman. Save. Lizardman. He made a fist and held it over his heart. A rumble of agreement came from the rest of the gathered tribes. Sukyu's long tongue hissed briefly and his tail lashed at his back. So we rescue the captives. Whatever our new lord has done, we are safe for the night. The rest of the tribe will sleep. We chiefs will conduct a raid and prove we would save ourselves if we could. The rumble went on, and Shaziryu nodded before asking, how do we get there fast enough? Rororo can't take all 5 of us. That. Zariasu pointed to the Death Knight nearest to him. We have a cart for hauling wood, but this time it will haul us, and the Death Knight here will pull it. I'm sure that was their intent in giving us more than we needed. The undead never get tired, the undead never feel fear, or need food, or water, or to relieve themselves. I saw one of these once when I was a traveler. They're fast. I never imagined one could be controlled, but since it can be? That settled it. Get the cart. Crush snapped at one of her people who scrambled away along with one of the Green-Clawed tribe, and a minute or so later, a crude, simple wooden cart made of bound-up logs cut in half horizontally, bound with oiled vines for rope and with just thick-tied sticks with multiple gaps between them was wheeled over. The wheels were not much better than the rest of it, simply logs chopped to make circles with a rough hole in the middle through which a wooden rod had been shoved and fixed in place with tar at either side of the wheels. It isn't much. Zariasu apologized for the cart and went over to rest a hand on the long pulling poles, but it has only ever had to haul wood before. Still, I know it can carry our weight. We won't be comfortable, but that isn't important. We go. Kyuka mumbled and clambered into the cart. He drew his legs in as close as he could to make room for the others. A swelling of pity ran through Zariasu as he saw the earnestness of the former genius who threw away his brilliance to become a shield for his tribe. Crush and Sukyu followed and did the same, while Shaziryu followed after, and Zariasu finally did the same. Completely unsure if this would work, he pointed to the nearest Death Knight. Death Knight. Stand in front of the cart. The lumbering behemoth's heavy feet left deep impressions on the soft ground as it obeyed and stood in front of their transportation. Death Knight, put away your shield and turn around. It obeyed again, the shield placed over its back. It was now positioned between the 2 poles. Death Knight, grab the poles beside you. Zariasu felt a surge of awe run through his body as the Death Knight bent down, grabbed the poles that had been angled up when the cart tilted a little from the weight of the 5 chiefs. Death Knight, pull the cart out of the gate. Zariasu gave the order, though he clutched Frostpain tight against his body while the Death Knight's long and lumbering steps drew the cart in the direction it had been commanded. All right, I think I've got the hang of this, Zariasu said softly. The other 4 looked at him in askance. He could read their very thoughts then. Are you sure? He looked behind them at the village full of lizardmen from all surviving tribes. No matter what happens, nothing will be the same after this. We all worked together, we all cooperated like never before. And now all 5 of us are going to rescue the captives of a tribe's elders? It was an exultant feeling that coursed through Zariasu's veins and gave him a burst of confidence enough to shout the next command at the Death Knight. Run that way. He leaned forward and pointed. The Death Knight looked back at him to see the direction he pointed, then the monster began a sprint. The heavy pounding feet were anything but subtle, and the force of the sudden lurch sent Zariasu flying back hard enough that it was only Crush and Shaziryu's darting arms that caught him before he could tumble entirely over the side of the cart. If he could have blushed cherry red, he would have. Instead he only laughed sheepishly, before the other chiefs chuckled good-naturedly in turn. Thank you, Zariasu said to his lover and brother. He quickly settled his back against a wooden pole, his tail dangling outside to catch the wind while the cart raced on and on without stopping. There were no roads, but the path along the lake was well enough worn that the cart was able to make good time without stopping. The tireless Death Knight moved as if he was carrying no weight at all, giving only the steady thudding noise of its heavily armored feet. A trip that was days for the weak and hours or longer for the strong was cut to a fraction of itself. The terrain raced by. The dark waters of the lake however were not especially placid. It wasn't hard to conclude why. Whatever he did, Hiketi's army must be moving. I do not envy her, Shaziryu said with grim satisfaction. What do you think we will do tomorrow? Crush asked the others. I think we will fight the frogmen. No, I think we must fight the frogmen. Zariasu replied to her and put a hand on her own. We must prove to the Great One that we are worthwhile as a whole. When they return, we offer ourselves to him as an army, to advance with him and fend off the frogman threat ourselves. If we show that we only need time, and only need help to grow strong, I think we will prosper. Sukyu fidgeted with his slingshot. I think this is true. I think if we show that we can fight, we will have more value than if we just crawl to the feet of the strong. By the time they reached the outskirts of their destination, all had come to an agreement. Death Knight, stop, Zariasu said, and the Death Knight slowed to a halt after a few paces. The ground in front was a churned-up mess. An army passed by here. Even in the dark it was obvious, footprints and deep impressions with kicked-up earth all led toward the lake. I know our new lord has something to do with this. He must. Nobody had it in them to argue, so we face a weakened frogman army. An even fight is a fight in our favor, Shaziryu said, and they hopped out of the cart to look at the remnants of the village. We're far enough away that they shouldn't have heard us coming. Surprise is our ally, Zariasu said, and dropping low, his breath became shallow, his pulse began to race again, his hold on frost pain tightened once more. Kyuku and I will attack first, Sukyu and Crush will act in support from the rear, Shaziryu circle around and free the captives while the frogman guards are distracted. Questions? None came, and they took position, with Shaziryu rushing wide out of view. They began to creep toward the ruins, the others at his back, all of them ready to attack and set their people free. Volume 3 Chapter 33. As though the gods of the lake favored the lizardmen, everything went smoothly. The frogmen that Zariasu saw on watch were few in number, and those there kept looking away from where they should have been watching. It was obvious why when Zariasu saw the direction that they looked instead. Toward home, whatever carried their army away, has them deeply worried. That much was obvious to Zariasu. The remnants of the gate were still standing, put back up by the occupiers or, more likely, their lizard-man slaves which had been forced to do the work for them. Anger burned in Zariasu's soul, and he wondered if that feeling of hatred, that glare he gave to the frogmen he saw standing with their spears on watch, could be felt. If it was, that might explain why the frogman turned and looked at the shadow of Zariasu before crying out in alarm. He sprang to his feet as soon as the frogman shouted, and began to charge. Kyuka sprang up a mere moment later, and together they charged at the gate with roars of battle fury, limbs pumping and kicking up dirt into the darkness at their backs. They charged blindly toward the gate. Out of the darkness a rock hurled by Sukyu destroyed the alerted frogman's head just as other shouts came up and the encampment came to life. Zariasu, faster without his armor, reached the gate first and slammed his sword into the wood like a club. The gate, weakened and damaged as it had been, collapsed into splinters beneath the blow of the enchanted sword, but as a precaution, he destroyed only one half, allowing himself and Kyuku to take up the space and avoid being surrounded. Frogmen charged with long spears, but these were not the elites, third-rate, the weakest warriors, inexperienced at best. He realized as they charged to meet him en masse, they came on, too many at once, and got in each other's way. Two, perhaps more eager, wiser, or braver than the others, used their powerful legs to jump toward the lizardman intruders, but a series of rocks and blasts of magic arrows shot the frogmen down in flight, sending them thudding down where they landed among their own, causing a number of frogmen to fall in a heap. Zariasu saw the tangled chaos and rushed forward. Icy burst, he called out, and the frost damage caused the frogmen to scream in pain, only for him to thrust or slash his sword into their bulbous throats while they trembled in pain. Chaos engulfed the encampment. The guards one and all abandoned their positions to charge the intruders, while Kyuku blocked the door and began fending off blows, knocking aside spears that failed to pierce his heavy enchanted white bone armor. Every time the frogmen seemed like they would gain an advantage, the warrior jumped behind Zariasu, and another, icy burst, caused a cacophony of screams through freezing pain that he would silence with frost pain's point or edge. Sprays of blood flew out into the night, while rocks and spells from the darkness behind him kept the fight on the ground where he and Kyuku were at their best. With their attention focused on the intruders, the frogmen proved that they were green in more than their flesh. They forgot entirely in their panic to properly concern themselves with the captives. Shaziryu clambered over the wall out of view and found only a single frogman still minding the bound elders. They are panicking now, But we're outnumbered. Sooner or later they'll go over the wall and surround my brother and Kyuku. I have to be quick. Shajiryu reminded himself and crept through the shadows. The captives watched with desperate silence. One lay dead, bleeding out on the ground, killed to keep the others silent. The bloody tip of the guard's spear was visible to Shajiryu, and full of hate and wrath, he leapt at the frogman from the back, his arm circling around the front where his hand caught the frogman's bulbous throat. The sharp claws brought a flood of pain and fear to the frogman guard. It struggled viciously, kicking and flailing, dropping the spear as it tried to claw at the fingers holding his throat. But it was useless. The body of the frogman was already dying as blood seeped through the slick scales of the furious chieftain, the sharp nails digging deeper into flesh until Shajiryu felt sure of his grip. He tightened it one more time and ripped the throat of the frogman out. The body fell twitching into the dirt. Big round eyes stared up at him, confused, lost, seemingly unable to understand what had gone wrong. Shajiryu ignored the frogman and went to the remaining captives. He took the fallen frogman's spear and sliced the ropes that bound the wrists and feet of the elders in profoundly contorted postures. They remained silent, sparing a moment to look with pity at the dead of their numbers that died before they could be rescued. If there was any mercy left in Shajiryu or his elders, it died then. He held the spear up overhead and threw it into the back of a frogman at the gate. The elders were not especially strong, nor were they numerous, but they were angry, and dead frogman weapons lay scattered about. They charged into the backs of the clustered young frogmen. Spears pierced the frogmen's backs as they were surrounded. A few with either more sense or fear tried to leap free, only to be shot down again by a flurry of rocks and blasts of magic that ripped through their bodies and sent them tumbling down into the fellows they had just tried to abandon. It was a slaughter after that. Icy burst, struck one more time amidst the cluster of frogman youths, and within it, Zariasu cut the screams of pain down to silence. When it was over, the 5 chiefs stood breathing hard, huffing, puffing, and staring down at the brutal carnage of pierced frogman bodies and severed frogman limbs. They appeared mere beasts then, not even people. Just hunks of monster flesh with no value at all. The elders, weary and in pain from their ordeal, began to explain and show off their marks. Cuts and gouges were common injuries, and the eldest of their number said, "We stayed behind to buy time for the rest to escape. They sent out some to chase our tribe as they ran away. We had our clubs, spears, and did what we could. We still killed at least 10 or more." He puffed out his chest, proud of managing that much even at his age, "But they jumped beyond us, surrounded us, and cut many down. They took us prisoner. They cut us, beat us, and made us work. They said we would be worked to death. We have not eaten since we were taken." Their bellies rumbled when he spoke, and Zariasu put his hand on the old lizard man's shoulder. "It's over now, grandfather. All the chiefs have come together, these are dead, and the rest will be soon. There is no reason to show mercy now." None of the chiefs argued with his words. "Eat your fill and make your way to the Green Claw camp," Zariasu said and turned to Tsukujuju. "Chief, we do have to hurry back, but can you remain with the elders and see them safely to my brother's village?" The yellow-speckled lizard man gave a sharp nod of affirmation. "With ease. Nothing will harm them unless I am too dead to stop it." "Thank you," Kyukyu uttered and bowed his head. A round of hands briefly clasped before the bloody band of chiefs went back to their cart, quietly got in, and made for the last village of lizardmen. Volume 3 Chapter 34. The empty bed was more than welcome to the weary Ainz. He peeled off his clothing, collapsed onto it, and breathed in the scent of perfectly luxuriant sheets. The faint scent of perfume lingered on as he drifted into dreams. Yes. Albedo. His male virility asserted itself, hungry, wanting. The deep longing for her legs to wrap around him consumed his mind as he slept. My lord, my love. Albedo's voice in his mind cried out in his dreams, sultry and sensual, rapturous and blissful. The heat of their loins and flesh to flesh drove him farther and farther down the path of desire in dreams. Ephemeral as a fog, she was on all fours. He held her horns. Then again she was on top of him, riding him as his hands ran over her perfect supple breasts. "Yes, your child, I want your child," she cried and captured his mouth in a kiss, undulating her hips while her wings battered against the air with such strength that they left the bed and coupled in the air. And then he awoke. A fog of bliss still hung in his mind, as he turned his head left and right, and there was no Albedo. A dream. She is a succubus. Could she have? On purpose? Does she know? He asked himself, and a dread feeling went over him, a raging guilt that sent his arms flopping wide out at his side. A dream, a beautiful dream for a vile man. What have I done? Heinz wanted so hard to cry that he did. Tears welled up in his eyes. The precious girl, the child of Tabula Smaragdina, how could I? He knew he shouldn't feel as guilty as he did. It had only been a mere joke in a few remaining minutes of the game. And in that moment, he incurred a guilt that would not leave him. She is a demon. Demons as a rule, despise humans. He wiped his eyes, it didn't matter. She was still, in his mind, closer to a daughter, and yet he tainted her. If she despises what I've become, can I even argue? Can she know? He suspected it was possible. The thought of telling her was dreadful. Right now she should be working with Demiurge, overseeing the integration of a few surrendered cities formerly of the Baharuth Empire and their surrounding towns or villages into his new kingdom. The distance was a relief. I have to tell them soon. But I'm not ready to face Albedo. To look at her without hating myself. For wanting her, for making her love me. If I'd known what would happen I wouldn't have done it. His love for the children of his friends, even though he knew at heart that there was evil in most of them which was not even buried, was all-consuming. Of course, that made the guilt over his dream of sleeping with Albedo even worse in his own mind. His heart pounded, his body was in a cold sweat, and he flung his forearm up to cover his eyes and shield himself from the dim light of the bedroom. What do I do? He asked himself. He couldn't keep Albedo away forever. Most of the Guardians now knew the truth. All that remained were Demiurge and Albedo, and the next choice was easy. Demiurge, the weakest Guardian I have, I can easily defeat him. But he is also the most cunning. I'm sure he would have already worked out my change if I kept him around. But I can't keep him in the dark forever. I need his help to find out if there is a way to go back. Or to something else perhaps? The possibility was an intriguing one that on its own, managed to briefly set his fears and dread aside. I need only to be immortal. I could become anything of that type and that would be sufficient. I have the stats now for virtually anything. Demiurge, I'll tell Demiurge next. He decided. Albedo. Forgive me. If you choose to do anything. I do want to live. But after what I've done to you, can I even resist? What will happen to your mind when I reveal the truth? That the one to twist your soul has become what you were created to revile? He took a deep and weighty breath as he lay on the soft mattress enshrouded in darkness. Just a little while longer, that's all I want, just a little while longer before I have to face up to the one I've done the worst to. He agonized and tried to sleep until he realized he dreaded the very idea of sleeping again. That he might dream of entwining himself in the arms of his friend's daughter made even the rest he craved, anathema. So Heinz stretched out his hand, opening his pocket dimension. He pulled out a ring of sustenance and slipped it onto his finger. Energy invigorated his body almost before he removed his hand after putting it into place. That is much, much better, he said to himself and slid off of the bed. He put his hands on his head where the fog of lust that consumed his dreams was slowly fading away. The fact that it still lingered beyond rest was telling, and he looked down the length of his naked body. My son is more awake than I am. He made the lame joke and went to his wardrobe. Part of him said he should reach for the rope that would summon a maid to attend to his needs, but in that late hour it would mean waking one of his friend's children up, and that had no appeal at all. Children need their rest, he told himself and quickly cast a cleaning spell over his body. A bath would be nice but I prefer not to be with anyone right now, he mumbled as he selected a gregarious crimson robe with black trim along the edges and around the sleeves and running up the center. They know. I know. But still. I'm not sure how to be around them all and be comfortable yet. Maybe when I've told the last of them. Yes. Maybe then. Or maybe not. He thought, and the thought haunted him right up until the moment he opened the door to find Shultia stoically standing guard and said to her, "It's time to go."